This is HOA Karen Patrol. I saved every receipt and every timestamp. The tow driver started to hook, and Karen screamed that if I touched the chain, she would add a safety violation. "You are going to stop recording me," she yelled, jabbing her finger at my phone while the wheel lift locked onto my rear axle with a sharp metallic clunk. I kept the camera steady. "I am on a public street," I said. "I have every right to document this." She turned to the tow driver, a wiry guy in a stained yellow vest who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Do not let him interfere," she snapped. "If he touches that chain, it is tampering with a contracted service." The driver glanced at me, then back at her, then shrugged and kept cranking. I live in Alpharetta, Georgia, in a place called Pinecrest Village, where the HOA pretends to care about property values, but really just wants control. My name does not matter. What matters is I am a civil engineer who hates sloppy paperwork, and Rebecca Moore, the HOA treasurer, just made the biggest mistake of her miserable little reign. She targeted me over a temporary paper permit in my windshield, claimed it was invalid, and decided to tow my car without proper authority. I work long hours on infrastructure projects, and I moved here because I thought a quiet neighborhood with rules would mean fewer headaches. Instead, I got Rebecca. Rebecca stepped closer, her sun hat casting a shadow across her face, and held up the clipboard like it was a legal summons. "You signed the covenants. Now you live the covenants," she said. "That permit is not recognized by this board. I already told you, temporary tags require advance registration with management, and you never submitted the form." I took a breath. "I submitted it 3 days ago," I said. "I have the email confirmation and the receipt number." She waved her hand. "Management never received it. Without confirmation from our vendor, that permit is invalid. I am authorized to enforce compliance under Section 12 of the parking addendum." The tow driver paused mid-crank and looked over. "Ma'am," he said, "I need to see the authorization slip." She yanked a folded paper from the clipboard sleeve and shoved it at him. He squinted at it, then looked at my car, then back at the paper. "This says plate ending in 721, he said. "This car is 723. Rebecca froze for half a second, then recovered. "Typo," she said. "It is obviously the same vehicle." The driver shook his head. "I cannot tow on a typo. You need to get a corrected authorization, or I am unhooking and leaving." Rebecca turned red. "You are contracted by this HOA," she hissed. "You follow my instructions, not his." The driver stepped back and crossed his arms. "Lady, I follow the law. If the plate does not match, it is not a valid tow. You want me to hook the wrong car and get sued? Call your office and get a corrected slip. Until then, I am done." He walked back to his truck, climbed in, and drove off, leaving Rebecca standing there with her clipboard shaking in her hand. I wanted to laugh, but I knew this was not over. Rebecca spun on me, and her voice dropped to something colder. "Go ahead and call whoever you want. I have a committee for that," she said. "You think you won today? This was a courtesy warning. Next time, I will have the plate right, and your car will be an impound before you even know it is gone." She turned and walked toward the management office at the far end of the lot, her radio crackling as she called someone. I stood there, heart pounding, watching her disappear around the corner. A delivery driver was stuck at the curb behind where the tow truck had been, window down, staring at me. "You good, man?" he called. I nodded. "For now," I said. I got in my car and sat for a minute, trying to calm down. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the management company. Your vehicle was flagged for non-compliance. Please contact the office immediately to resolve the parking violation, or further enforcement action will be taken. I stared at the screen. The tow driver had just refused to hook my car because the plate did not match, and they were already sending me a violation notice like nothing happened. I swallowed my anger because I knew the moment to use it was coming. I took a screenshot of the text, then pulled up my email and found the confirmation I had sent 3 days ago when I registered the temporary permit. I forwarded it to myself with a timestamp, then saved a copy to my cloud drive. Rebecca wanted a paper trail? I would give her one she could not erase. I drove home, parked in my assigned spot, and walked inside. My wife was in the kitchen. "How was your day?" she asked. I shook my head. "HOA," I said. She sighed. "Again?" I nodded. "This time it is the treasurer." She tried to tow me over a permit I already registered. My wife set down her coffee. "Are you serious?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of the violation text and the email confirmation. She read it twice, then looked at me. "What are you going to do?" I sat down. "I am going to document everything," I said. "Every call, every email, every notice. And when she slips up again, I am going to bury her with it." The next morning, I woke up to find a printed notice taped to my front door. It was on Pinecrest Village HOA letterhead, signed by Rebecca Moore, treasurer. The notice said my vehicle had been observed in violation of guest parking restrictions and that I was being assessed a $50 administrative fee for failure to display a valid decal. I stood there in my boxers and undershirt, reading it twice to make sure I was not hallucinating. My car was not in guest parking. It was in my assigned spot. The decal was on my windshield, right where it had been for the past 6 months. I took a photo of the notice, then peeled it off the door and brought it inside. My wife looked at it and shook her head. "This does not even make sense," she said. "She is making stuff up." "I know," I said, "but she is counting on me not having proof." I pulled out my laptop and logged into the HOA portal. I checked my account. The $50 fee was already posted, along with a note that said failure to pay within 10 days would result in a lien filing. My hands were shaking. I took a deep breath, then called the management company. A woman answered on the third ring. "Pinecrest Village Management, how can I help you?" I gave her my address and explained the situation. She put me on hold for 2 minutes, then came back. "Sir, I show a violation notice issued yesterday for improper parking. If you believe this is an error, you will need to submit a written appeal to the board within 7 business days." "I already registered my temporary permit," I said. "I sent confirmation 3 days ago." She clicked something on her keyboard. "I do not see that in the system. If you did not receive a confirmation reply, it was not processed." "I have the email," I said. "I can forward it to you right now." She hesitated. "You can include that with your appeal, but I cannot override the fee without board approval. That is the process." I hung up and stared at the wall. Rebecca had figured out how to weaponize the system. She could issue bogus violations, post fees to my account, and force me to fight each one through a slow bureaucratic process while the charges piled up. Someone knocked. I opened the door and found my neighbor from 2 houses down, a guy named Eric, who worked from home doing IT consulting. He was holding his phone. "Hey," he said, "did you get one of these?" He turned his screen toward me. It was a photo of a notice identical to mine, taped to his door. Guest parking violation, $50 fee. Eric shook his head. I do not even have guests right now. My car is in my driveway. This is insane. I showed him my notice. Same thing, I said. Rebecca is going after everyone she does not like. Eric frowned. Why? I shrugged. Power trip. She is the treasurer, so she can post fees to accounts without anyone checking her work. Eric looked at the notice again, then back at me. What are we supposed to do? I told him about the appeal process, and he groaned. That is going to take weeks. By then, she will have hit us with late fees and lien threats. I nodded. That is the point. She wants us to pay just to make it stop. Eric leaned against the doorframe. I know a guy, he said. Local attorney. He used to do HOA disputes before he switched to corporate stuff. Want me to reach out? I thought about it. My attorney says if I want an emergency stop, I need one document today, and Karen is stalling on purpose. I did not have an attorney yet, but I knew I would need one soon. Yeah, I said. Reach out. Let me know what he says. Eric nodded and walked back to his house. I closed the door and sat down at my laptop. I opened a new document and started a timeline. Every interaction with Rebecca, every notice, every fee, every email. I was building a case, one entry at a time. That afternoon, I got another email from the management company. This one said the board had scheduled a hearing for my parking violation appeal, but the earliest available date was 3 weeks out. 3 weeks. By then, Rebecca could issue a dozen more violations and bury me in fees. I replied asking if there was an emergency process for incorrect violations, and the response came back 20 minutes later. All appeals follow the standard timeline. No exceptions. I closed my laptop and went outside. The heat hit me like a wall, humid and sticky, shimmering off the asphalt in the parking lot. I walked to my car and checked the windshield. The decal was still there, clear and visible. The temporary permit was gone because it had expired, but I had already registered the new permanent decal weeks ago. I took a photo of the windshield, then another photo of my assigned parking space number painted on the curb. Then I walked to the management office. The door was locked. A sign said office hours were Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 to noon. It was Thursday. I stood there, staring at the sign, feeling my blood pressure climb. Rebecca had timed this perfectly. She issued the violation on a day when the office was closed, so I could not walk in and dispute it in person. I would have to wait until Monday, and by then, the 10-day payment deadline would be half over. I turned and saw Rebecca standing near the mailboxes at the edge of the parking lot, talking to another board member. She glanced at me, then went back to her conversation like I was not even there. I walked over. Rebecca, I said. She looked up, and her expression was pure ice. Yes? I need to talk to you about the violation notice, I said. It is incorrect. My car was in my assigned spot, not guest parking, and my decal is valid. She pulled out her clipboard, the same one wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve, and flipped through a few pages. According to our records, your vehicle was observed in guest parking on Tuesday evening at 6:15. The decal on your windshield does not match the current registration database. I stared at her. I was not in guest parking on Tuesday. I was at work until 8. She shrugged. The compliance officer reported it. If you believe it is an error, you can appeal. I already tried, I said. The hearing is 3 weeks out. That is not my problem, she said. You signed the covenants. Now you live the covenants. If you do not like the process, you should have read it before you bought here. The other board member, a thin guy in his 50s, glanced at me, then looked away. Rebecca turned back to her clipboard. Is there anything else? I wanted to yell, but I kept my voice level. I am going to fight this, I said. Every bogus fee, every bad faith notice. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. Go ahead and call whoever you want. I have a committee for that. She walked away, the other board member trailing behind her like a shadow. That night, I got a text from Eric. His attorney friend agreed to take a look. I drove over to Eric's house and met the guy, a lawyer named Dan, who looked like he had not slept in a week, but still had sharp eyes and a firm handshake. Dan sat at Eric's kitchen table and listened while I walked him through everything. The botched tow attempt, the bogus violation, the $50 fee, the 3-week appeal delay. He took notes on a yellow legal pad, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he set down his pen. This is textbook HOA overreach, he said. The treasurer does not have unilateral authority to issue fines without board approval, and she definitely cannot authorize towing without proper documentation. The plate number mistake proves she is acting in bad faith. I leaned forward. Can we stop her? Dan tapped his pen against the pad. Depends. Do you have documentation of everything? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots, the email confirmations, the photos, the violation notices. He scrolled through it all, then looked up. This is good. This is really good. But here is the problem. If you want an injunction to stop her from issuing more violations, we need to file in court, and that takes time. The faster option is to go after her directly at the board level. Force a special meeting. Present your evidence and demand accountability. If enough homeowners are pissed off, you can trigger a recall vote. I glanced at Eric. How many people has she hit with bogus fees? Eric pulled up his phone. I have been asking around. At least 6 that I know of, maybe more. Dan nodded. Get them together. Build a coalition. Make noise. The board hates bad publicity. And if you can prove she is costing the HOA money in legal exposure, they will throw her under the bus to save themselves. We spent the next 2 hours putting together a plan. Dan agreed to draft a formal demand letter on his letterhead, requesting an emergency board meeting to address the parking enforcement issues. Eric started a group chat with the other homeowners who had been hit with fees, and within an hour, we had 9 people ready to sign a joint complaint. I went home that night feeling like I finally had a strategy. But Rebecca was not done. The next morning, I woke up to find my gate access card deactivated. I swiped it at the community entrance, and the red light blinked. I tried again. Nothing. A car honked behind me. I pulled forward into the guest lane and parked, then walked to the call box. I punched in the code for the management office. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I called the management company from my cell. The same woman answered. Pinecrest Village Management. My gate access is not working, I said. Can you check my account? She put me on hold, then came back. Sir, your access was suspended pending resolution of outstanding violations. What? I said. I have not even had a hearing yet. That is the policy, she said. If a homeowner has unpaid fees over 48 hours past due, access privileges are suspended until payment is received. The fee was posted 2 days ago, I said. It is not even past the 10-day deadline yet." She hesitated. "Let me check with the board liaison." She put me on hold again. I stood there in the guest lane, watching cars go through the main gate, feeling my chest tighten. When she came back, her voice was clipped. "The suspension stands. You will need to pay the outstanding balance or file an appeal." "I already filed an appeal," I said. "It is scheduled for 3 weeks from now." She did not respond for a second. "Then that is the timeline, sir. Until then, you can use the guest code for entry, but it will log your vehicle as a visitor." I hung up and got back in my car. I punched in the guest code, and the gate opened. I drove through, parked in my assigned spot, and sat there staring at the windshield. Rebecca had just escalated from fees to access control. She was locking me out of my own neighborhood, forcing me to log in as a guest every time I came home, and creating a paper trail that made it look like I was violating guest parking rules. It was brilliant and vicious. I called Dan and told him what happened. He swore under his breath. "That is retaliation," he said. "She is trying to force you into compliance by making your life miserable." "Can she do that?" I asked. "Technically, yes," he said. "If the HOA bylaws give her discretion to suspend access for unpaid fees. But morally and legally, it is shaky as hell, especially since you have not had a hearing yet. We can add it to the complaint." I took a breath. "How fast can you get that demand letter done?" Dan paused. "I can have it to you by end of day. But listen, if she is willing to go this far, she is not going to back down just because you threaten a meeting. You need leverage, something that makes her more afraid of you than you are of her." I thought about it. "I have documentation," I said. "Every email, every photo, every notice." Dan was quiet for a second. "That is evidence. Leverage is different. Leverage is something she does not want anyone to see." I hung up and sat there, thinking, what did Rebecca not want anyone to see? I pulled up the HOA portal on my phone and logged in. I navigated to the financial section and looked at my account. The $50 fee was posted, but there was no backup documentation attached. No photos, no compliance report, no timestamp. Just a line item that said parking violation and a date. I clicked on the bylaws link and scrolled through the parking enforcement section. It said all violations must be documented with photographic evidence and submitted to the management company within 24 hours. I took a screenshot. Then I sent an email to the management company requesting a copy of the photographic evidence for my violation. The reply came back in 10 minutes. All evidence is retained by the compliance officer. Please direct your request to the board liaison. I replied asking who the compliance officer was. No response. I called the office. No answer. I tried the board liaison email listed on the website. Bounced back as undeliverable. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmare stories where the paperwork fights back. Rebecca had set up a system where she could issue violations with no accountability and no documentation. She was the treasurer, the compliance officer, and the gatekeeper for all disputes. I was fighting a one-woman enforcement machine, and she had rigged every step of the process to protect herself. But I am a civil engineer. I know how to find weak points in a structure, and Rebecca had just shown me hers. That afternoon, I drove to the county clerk's office and requested a copy of the Pinecrest Village HOA covenants and bylaws on file. The clerk handed me a thick-bound booklet, and I sat in the lobby and started reading. It took me an hour, but I found it. Section 18, Subsection 4. All board officers must be in good standing with HOA dues and assessments. Any officer with outstanding balances over 90 days past due shall be removed from office pending resolution. I pulled out my phone and logged into the HOA portal again. I navigated to the board member directory and clicked on Rebecca's profile. Her account summary was public, visible to all homeowners. And there it was, a line item from 6 months ago. Special assessment for roof repair, $250. Status, unpaid. Balance due, $250 plus $15 per month late fee. Total current balance, $340. Rebecca Moore, treasurer of the Pinecrest Village HOA, was not in good standing with her own dues. I took screenshots of her account summary, then saved them to 3 different cloud drives. Then, I called Dan. I found it, I said. Found what? Leverage, I said. Rebecca is $340 behind on her own HOA dues. According to the bylaws, she should have been removed from office months ago. Dan was quiet for a second, then he laughed. You are kidding. I am not, I said. It is right there in the public portal. Anyone can see it. She has been hitting homeowners with bogus fees while she has not paid her own assessment. Dan whistled. That is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. Okay, here is what we do. We do not play that card yet. We let her keep digging. We get the demand letter out, we force the meeting, and we let her show up thinking she still has control. Then, at the meeting, you drop that bomb in front of everyone. She will not see it coming. I felt something shift in my chest. Relief, maybe, or just the knowledge that I finally had a way to fight back. When is the meeting? I asked. Dan paused. If we file the demand tomorrow, the board has to respond within 10 business days. Figure 2 weeks, maybe less if enough homeowners raise hell. I will make sure it happens. I hung up and drove home. When I pulled up to the gate, I punched in the guest code and the barrier lifted. I parked in my assigned spot, walked to my front door, and found another notice taped there. This one was a summons for an emergency compliance hearing, scheduled for the following Tuesday at the management office. The charge was repeated guest parking violations and unauthorized use of guest access codes. I stared at it, then laughed out loud. Rebecca was so deep in her own lies that she was now accusing me of violating guest parking rules by using the guest code she forced me to use. I took a photo of the notice, then sent it to Dan with a single message. She just tried to charge me for using the guest code she made me use. His reply came back immediately. Unreal. Bring it to the meeting. That night, Eric called me. The group chat blew up, he said. Rebecca issued 3 more violation notices today. One guy got hit with a fine for parking his work truck in his own driveway. Another woman got charged for having her trash cans out 4 hours past pickup. People are furious. How many signed the complaint? I asked. 14, he said. And counting. Dan is filing the demand letter tomorrow morning. I leaned back in my chair. Good. Let her keep going. The more she does, the worse it looks. Eric hesitated. You think this is going to work? I thought about the screenshots on my phone, the bylaws I had memorized, the timeline I had been building for weeks. Yeah, I said. I think it is. The following Monday, the demand letter hit the board. Dan sent me a copy. It was 3 pages, single-spaced, citing every violation of procedure, every bad faith enforcement action, every retaliatory measure Rebecca had taken. It demanded an emergency board meeting within 7 days to address homeowner complaints and review the treasurer's authority. It named Rebecca by name. It requested a full audit of all parking violations issued in the past 6 months. And it warned that failure to respond would result in legal action. By Tuesday morning, the board caved. They scheduled a special meeting for that Friday at 7 in the evening, open to all homeowners, to discuss parking enforcement policies and review recent compliance actions. Rebecca showed up 15 minutes early, clipboard in hand, radio clipped to her belt, looking like she owned the room. She sat at the head table with the other board members and shuffled papers while homeowners filed in. By 7, the room was packed. 14 people from the group chat, plus another dozen who had heard about the meeting and showed up to watch. Eric sat next to me in the front row. Dan was in the back, arms crossed, watching everything. The board president, a retired accountant named Margaret, called the meeting to order. She looked uncomfortable. "Tonight we are here to address concerns about parking enforcement," she said. "We have received a demand letter from an attorney representing several homeowners, and we want to give everyone a chance to be heard. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this is a civil discussion. No shouting, no personal attacks." Rebecca leaned forward. "I would like to make an opening statement," she said. Margaret hesitated, then nodded. Rebecca stood up and pulled out her clipboard. "Over the past 6 months, this community has seen a significant increase in parking violations," she said. "Guests overstaying, unapproved vehicles in resident spaces, expired decals, fire lane obstructions. As treasurer and compliance officer, it is my responsibility to enforce the rules fairly and consistently. Every violation I have issued has been documented and processed according to our covenants. If homeowners are upset, it is because they broke the rules, not because I did anything wrong." She sat down. The room was silent for a second. Then someone in the back said, "That is bull." Margaret banged the gavel. "Order. Let us hear from the homeowners with complaints." One by one, people stood up and told their stories. The guy who got fined for parking his work truck in his own driveway. The woman who was charged for trash cans. Eric, who got hit with a guest parking violation when he had no guests. Every story followed the same pattern. Rebecca issued a violation with no documentation, posted a fee, and refused to provide evidence or allow a timely appeal. Margaret looked increasingly uncomfortable. Rebecca sat stone-faced, her clipboard in front of her like a shield. When it was my turn, I stood up and pulled out the folder Dan had helped me prepare. "My name is on the complaint," I said. Rebecca tried to tow my car based on a plate number that did not match. When that failed, she issued a parking violation for guest parking, even though my car was in my assigned spot. Then she suspended my gate access and forced me to use a guest code, then tried to fine me for using that code. I handed the folder to Margaret. Every document is in there. Email confirmations, photos, timestamps, violation notices. She issued charges with no evidence and no due process, and she did it to retaliate because I challenged her. Rebecca stood up. "That is a lie," she said. Every violation was legitimate. Margaret flipped through the folder, her expression tightening. "Rebecca," she said quietly, "where is the photographic evidence for these violations?" Rebecca waved her hand. "It is in the compliance files. I can provide it at the next board meeting." "No," Margaret said. "You need to provide it now. The bylaws require documentation within 24 hours. If you issued violations without taking photos, that is a procedural failure. Rebecca's face went red. I do not have to justify my enforcement actions to you, she snapped. I am the treasurer. I have authority under Section 12. Margaret set down the folder. Actually, Rebecca, you do not. The board votes on enforcement actions. You do not have unilateral authority. Rebecca grabbed her clipboard. You are questioning my integrity? Margaret took a breath. I am questioning your process. And based on what I am hearing tonight, I think we need to suspend all pending violations until we can do a full review. The room erupted. People clapped. Someone shouted finally. Rebecca's face went from red to white. She turned to the other board members, but none of them would meet her eyes. I stood up again. There is one more thing, I said. Margaret looked at me. According to Section 18 of the covenants, all board officers must be in good standing with HOA dues. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots. Rebecca Moore currently has an outstanding balance of $340 for a special assessment that is 6 months overdue. Under the bylaws, she should have been removed from office months ago. The room went dead silent. Rebecca froze. Margaret stared at me, then looked at Rebecca. Is that true? Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at her clipboard, then back at Margaret. That assessment was disputed, she said. I filed a challenge. Margaret shook her head. If it is still showing as unpaid in the system, then it is not resolved. You should have recused yourself from enforcement actions until it was cleared. You cannot issue fines to other homeowners while you are delinquent on your own account. Someone in the back row laughed. Rebecca spun around, her face twisted with rage. This is a setup, she yelled. He is lying. He hacked the portal. I held up my phone. It is public information, I said. Anyone can log in and see it. Rebecca turned to Margaret. You are going to believe him over me? Margaret stood up and closed the folder. Rebecca, I am going to recommend that the board vote tonight to suspend you from office pending an audit of all enforcement actions and a review of your account status. If the audit shows procedural violations or financial misconduct, we will move to remove you permanently. Rebecca grabbed her clipboard and her radio and stormed toward the door. You are all cowards, she yelled. You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants. She slammed the door behind her. The room was silent for a second. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole room. Margaret banged the gavel. Order. Let us take a vote. The vote was unanimous. Rebecca was suspended immediately. Margaret announced that all pending violations issued by Rebecca in the past 6 months would be reviewed and refunded if found to be improperly documented. She also said the board would hire an independent auditor to review the treasurer's financial records and enforcement logs. The meeting adjourned at 9. People came up to me afterward, shaking my hand, thanking me for standing up. Eric clapped me on the shoulder. You did it, man. Dan walked over, grinning. That was perfect. You dropped the bomb at exactly the right moment. I felt exhausted and relieved at the same time. Is it over? I asked. Dan shook his head. Not yet. She is going to lawyer up and fight the suspension. But you have the high ground now. She is the one on defense. We walked out into the parking lot. The humid night air hit me, and I took a deep breath. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the management company. Your gate access has been restored. All pending violations on your account have been removed. Your balance is 0. I showed it to Eric. He laughed. Looks like it is over. I nodded. For now. The next few weeks were quiet. The board hired the auditor, and the report came back 2 weeks later. Rebecca had issued over 60 violations in 6 months, and 40 of them had no supporting documentation. She had also been charging $5 processing fees on every violation and pocketing the money instead of depositing it into the HOA account. Total amount missing, $300. The board voted to remove her from office and filed a small claims case to recover the funds. Rebecca did not show up for the hearing. The judge ruled in favor of the HOA, and Rebecca was ordered to pay restitution plus court costs. But the real karma moment came 3 weeks later, at a public meeting where the board reviewed the audit findings and voted on new parking enforcement policies. The room was packed again, but this time Rebecca was not there. Margaret read the audit summary out loud, and when she got to the part about the missing processing fees, someone in the back row said, "So she was stealing?" Margaret nodded. Technically, yes. The board has recovered the funds and implemented new financial controls to prevent this from happening again. Then she opened the floor for comments. One by one, homeowners stood up and told stories about Rebecca, how she had targeted people she did not like, how she had weaponized the rules to settle personal grudges, how she had made life miserable for anyone who questioned her authority. It went on for an hour. By the end, the room was laughing at some of the stories. One guy said Rebecca had once tried to fine him for having a flower pot on his porch because it was not an approved color. Another woman said Rebecca had threatened to tow her car because it had a bumper sticker that said coexist. When the comments finally ended, Margaret looked around the room. "I think it is clear that the previous enforcement approach was not working," she said. "Moving forward, all violations will require photographic evidence. All fees will be reviewed by the full board, and no single officer will have unilateral authority to issue fines or suspend access." Does anyone have objections? Silence. Margaret banged the gavel. Motion passes. The meeting adjourned, and people stood up clapping. I stayed in my seat for a minute, watching the crowd file out. Eric came over. "Feels good, right?" he said. I nodded. "Yeah, it does." That night, I got a text from Dan. "Just heard from a buddy at the courthouse. Rebecca listed her house for sale this morning. Looks like she is moving out." I stared at the text for a second, then set my phone down. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired. But I also felt something else, relief. The war was over, and I had won by doing exactly what I do best. I kept records, I followed the process, and I made Rebecca prove every claim she made. And when she could not, the whole thing collapsed. 2 months later, the HOA held elections. Margaret stepped down as president, and a new slate of board members took over. The new president was a younger guy, a project manager for a tech company who ran on a platform of transparency and common sense enforcement. He won by a landslide. At the first meeting under the new board, he stood up and said, "I want to start by apologizing to everyone who was targeted by the previous administration. We are committed to running this HOA the way it should be run, as a service to homeowners, not as a power trip." The room applauded. He went on to announce that the board was hiring a professional management company to handle day-to-day operations, and that all enforcement actions would now go through a formal review process with written appeals available within 5 business days. No more clipboard tyrants. No more gotcha fees. No more gate access games. I sat in the back row and listened, feeling like I could finally breathe. After the meeting, the new president came over and shook my hand. "I heard what you did," he said. "Thank you. Without you, we would still be stuck with the old system." I shrugged. I just wanted to park my car without getting harassed. He laughed. "Well, you got that, and a whole lot more." I walked out into the parking lot and got in my car. The decal on my windshield was still there, clean and visible. I pulled out of my assigned spot and drove to the gate. It opened automatically, no guest code needed, and I drove through without a second thought. The neighborhood looked the same as it always had. Tree-lined streets, neat lawns, identical mailboxes. But something felt different. The wait was gone. The fear that every time I came home, I would find another notice taped to my door, another fee posted to my account, another threat from someone who thought a clipboard made them untouchable. I drove home and parked. My wife was on the porch, watering the plants. "How did it go?" she asked. I smiled. "It is over." She set down the watering can and hugged me. "I am proud of you," she said. "You did not let her win." I held her for a minute, then pulled back. I did not do it alone. Eric helped. Dan helped. A dozen other homeowners helped. We all pushed back together. She nodded. That is how it is supposed to work. We went inside and made dinner. Later that night, I logged into the HOA portal one last time and checked my account. Balance. 0. No pending violations. No suspended access. No threatening emails. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. I thought about Rebecca, wherever she was now, probably terrorizing some other neighborhood with her clipboard and her covenants. I thought about the 40 homeowners who had been hit with bogus fees and the $300 she had stolen. I thought about the tow driver who refused to hook my car because the plate did not match, and the way Rebecca's face had gone white when I dropped the audit bomb in front of the whole board. And I thought about the moment when Margaret read the findings out loud and the room laughed, because Rebecca had finally been caught in her own web of lies, and everyone knew it. That was the real payoff. Not revenge, not destruction, just accountability. Rebecca had spent months weaponizing the HOA rules to make people miserable, and in the end, the same rules took her down. The bylaws she loved to quote, the covenants she used like a weapon, the process she thought she controlled, all of it turned against her the moment someone actually read the fine print and held her to the same standard she demanded from everyone else. A few weeks later, I ran into the delivery driver who had been stuck at the curb the day Rebecca tried to tow my car. He was dropping off a package, and he recognized me. "Hey, you are the guy with the HOA lady, right?" I nodded. "That is me." He grinned. "I heard she got voted out. My sister lives in this neighborhood, and she told me the whole story." "That was wild, man." "Good for you," I shrugged, just glad it is over. He handed me the package. People like that always think they are untouchable until someone actually stands up to them. You did the whole neighborhood a favor. He walked back to his truck and drove off. I stood there for a second, holding the package, thinking about what he said. People like that always think they are untouchable. Rebecca had thought she was untouchable because she had the title, the clipboard, and the backing of a system that was supposed to protect her. But systems only work when people follow the rules, and the moment she stopped following them, the system stopped protecting her. I went back inside and set the package on the counter. My wife was in the living room, reading a book. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just thinking." "About what?" about how sometimes the only way to beat a bully is to make them follow their own rules. She looked up and smiled. "That is a very engineer thing to say." I laughed. "I guess it is." The last time I thought about Rebecca was 6 months later, when I saw a for sale sign go up on her old house. The new owners moved in a few weeks after that, a young couple with a toddler. They seemed nice. They waved when they saw me outside. No clipboard, no radio, no threats, just neighbors. The Pinecrest Village HOA kept running under the new board, and things got better. Violations were rare, and when they happened, they were handled fairly. The audit results were posted on the website for everyone to see, and the new financial controls meant no one could ever pocket fees again. The parking enforcement vendor was replaced with a company that required signed authorization forms and photographic evidence for every tow. And the bylaws were amended to require board approval for any enforcement action over $25. I kept my documentation for another year, just in case. But I never needed it. The war was over, the neighborhood was quiet, and I could finally park my car without looking over my shoulder. I learned a lot from that fight. I learned that HOAs can be weaponized by petty tyrants if no one pushes back. I learned that the rules people use to control you can also be the rules that set you free if you are willing to read them and use them the right way. And I learned that standing up for yourself is not about winning every argument or destroying the other person. It is about refusing to be bullied, documenting everything, and trusting that the truth will eventually speak for itself. Rebecca tried to tow my car, suspend my access, and bury me in fees because she thought I would just pay and shut up like everyone else. But I did not. I kept records. I read the bylaws. I found her weak spot. And when the moment came, I used it. Not to hurt her, but to stop her. The HOA board voted to retract every violation she issued without documentation, and they refunded every bogus fee. My $50 parking charge disappeared. Eric got his money back. The guy with the work truck got his money back. Everyone who had been targeted got justice, and Rebecca walked away with nothing but a judgment against her and a reputation she would never recover. That is how you win an HOA fight. Not by yelling, not by vandalizing property, not by breaking the law. You win by being smarter, more patient, and more willing to read the fine print than the person trying to screw you over. And in the end, at a public meeting moment where the minutes turned against Karen, Rebecca was outvoted so hard the room laughed. She tried to argue, tried to claim the audit was biased, tried to say I had manipulated the system. But no one believed her, because the evidence was right there in black and white, signed and dated, impossible to deny. The board retracted the parking violation in writing, along with every other violation she had issued in the previous 6 months. They posted the retraction on the website, sent copies to every affected homeowner, and included a formal apology for the enforcement failures. Rebecca resigned 2 days later and never showed up to another meeting. And the best part, the real funny karma beat, came 3 months after the audit when someone filed a public records request for the doorbell video footage from the night Rebecca claimed she never came by my house to issue the original violation. The footage showed her walking up to my door at 6:15, taping the notice, and walking away. She had lied under oath at the hearing, and when the footage played at the next board meeting, the room erupted in laughter. She never came by, someone said, echoing her own words. The video says otherwise. Margaret shook her head and closed the file. No further comment needed. I sat in the back row that night and watched it all unfold, and for the first time in months, I felt light. The war was over. The truth had won, and Rebecca was gone. I walked out into the parking lot, got in my car, and drove home with the windows down and the radio up. The gate opened automatically. My decal was valid, my account was clear, and I never heard from Rebecca Moore again. A week later, I got an email from Dan. Just wanted to let you know, the HOA settled the restitution case. Rebecca paid the full amount plus court costs. Your share of the refund will be deposited by the end of the month. I replied with a single word. Thanks, he wrote back. You earned it. Enjoy your quiet neighborhood. I closed the laptop and went outside. The sun was setting, the heat shimmer was fading, and the street was quiet. My wife came out and sat next to me on the porch. You did good, she said. I nodded. Yeah, I did. And that was it. No dramatic final confrontation, no revenge plot, no vigilante justice. Just paperwork, persistence, and a willingness to hold someone accountable when they thought they were above the rules. Rebecca tried to make my life hell because she had a clipboard and a title. But I had something better. I had the truth, and I had the patience to prove it. In the end, that was enough. I hope the rest of your day is peaceful.